Hello, you guys. I am Christine. I am your senior judge for today. I'm looking for my commentary. Here it is. Okay, so again, we're not going to talk about our affiliation or what school we are. We're just going to stick with our team. In this part of the competition, what role have you given to us?
We are the Microsoft Board of Directors.
Micah, thank you. I was hoping they would answer. Thank you. And then, so you'll have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem. And then we will spend 10 to 15 minutes as your board of directors asking questions specifically. And then after that, we will convert back to our judging self and then give you guys some feedback on the presentation itself to help you with your future presentations, okay? Excellent. So I'm going to put myself on mute and let you guys start your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'll just present my presentation right now. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you. So, starting off, one second. So basically, our mission today is to help our Microsoft make a future-friendly, responsible decisions at the intersection of AI innovation and sustainability. Before we dive deep into the presentation, I would like to introduce our team. We are CAAV Consulting, also known as U38, with Cole as our financial strategist, me as the general strategist, Akhil as our ethical strategist, and Vincent as our legal strategist. So we are a student-led team passionate about sustainability and ethical innovations. Our team consists of students from data science, mechanical, and industrial engineering. So we kind of bring a multidisciplinary approach to today's challenge. And just to give a background, we all know that Microsoft is a global leader in software, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. And in the midst of the ongoing AI race, Microsoft competes fiercely with giants like Google, Meta, and Amazon, who have already stepped their foot into this huge area. And to stay ahead, the company has committed nearly $80 billion towards building AI-focused data centers. And at the same time, Microsoft has other ambitions, such as environmental promises, most notably to become carbon negative by 2030. However, the reality is kind of more complicated, and the emissions are rising, water consumption is surging, and the questions around cash flow, legal compliance, and environmental ethics are stacking up. So basically, our investigation focuses on the financial, legal, and ethical problems Microsoft must navigate to expand its AI infrastructure. Microsoft is basically on the edge of a breakthrough, leading the charge in artificial intelligence, yet weighed down by many rising emissions, mounting legal pressure, and financial strains. So, just to give a hint of our solution, with the clock ticking towards 2030, the choices Microsoft makes today will define its legacy and its future in sustainable innovation. So, what if there was a way to build a smarter, cleaner, and more responsible uh, solution without slowing down the AI revolution? In this presentation, we'll reveal a blueprint to transform Microsoft's pains into growth power, a new way to build greener, faster, smarter, a strategy to earn back trust through action and not just promises. This basically is not just a solution, but also a roadmap for Microsoft to lead ethically, sustainably, and unapologetically into the future. Over to Cole for the financial issues.
Yep. So let's get started on the financial overview. So far, as my colleague previously mentioned, Microsoft has committed about $80 billion to AI data centers already. Pretty substantial financial commitment, clearly signaling Microsoft's intent to lead in AI infrastructure. This investment's enabling them to rapidly scale their compute capacity, critical for supporting large AI workloads. They're also notably the second largest investor in OpenAI, with $13 billion invested to date. This investment isn't just financial, though, it's deeply strategic, strengthening Microsoft's AI capabilities across their cloud and software ecosystems. And then just to mention their key competitors here, Google and Meta are also investing aggressively into AI, with Meta approximately estimate with Meta investing about 65 billion and Google 70 billion. So Microsoft is still, as far as investment goes, leading the pack, but the pressure to continue innovating and scaling remains high. Next slide, please. Yep. So just looking at the amount of cash they have on hand, they're clearly overcommitting in some areas. So currently they have $71 billion in cash or cash equivalents on hand. Pretty strong cash position overall, but by most standards, however, when we factor in the scale of AI and the infrastructure investments, that cushion starts to look a bit tighter than it really appears on the surface, especially when with their competitors shortly behind. They also owe 29 billion in back taxes, pretty substantial liability that needs to be settled at some point. And I guess the big question here is how are they going to fund the rest of these massive investments? Already they're committing 80 billion. They don't have 80 billion in cash on hand. So it's unclear whether Microsoft is going to rely more heavily on borrowing or strategic partnerships, or perhaps even just trimming like other expenditures. So borrowing certainly an option given their credit strength and low debt levels. But it would be, it would represent a notable shift in financial strategy. So the question is, I guess, do they have the cash for these projects? In short term, yes, but barely. And given the long-term scale of these AI investments and their commitment to sustainability, this can be potentially an issue down the line. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to quickly look at the cost of materials to build these data centers. Microsoft has set the goal to build these data centers using sustainable building materials, aligning with their broader environmental commitments and long-term environmental goals, helping position themselves as like a responsible leader in tech. However, this sustainability introduces some real cost issues. So one of the primary materials they're looking to build these data centers out of is cross-laminated timber, which is an environmentally friendlier alternative to something like steel or concrete. But it comes with a pretty significant price premium at 15 to 29% more expensive than your traditional building materials. And this cost difference could add up pretty quickly when looking at building these massive data centers, which, and also adding on to the pressure, I guess, is in recent news, the new tariffs. So, prices of building materials could possibly even be going up even more, compounding on their financial strain. So this is really just presenting a clear trade-off here between, the speed of building these data centers, the cost of building the data centers, and also while making sure they're also following through on their sustainability commitments. So like they can move quickly and cheaply and like adhere to these sustainability goals but it's going to be very difficult to do like all three at once. And these choices are definitely going to impact the pace of the AI infrastructure being built and, possibly public perception around environmental leadership. Next slide, please. So another cost that's really needs to be considered is the cost of the environment of building these data centers. So Microsoft must account for environmental costs as well. These facilities are incredibly resource intensive, not just in terms of electricity, but also water, which is critical for cooling all the hardware that runs these huge AI models. So to put into perspective, GPT-4 consumes about 3 bottles of water per 100 words generated. And if you, kind of calculate that over the course of a year, we're talking over 1 trillion bottles of water, which is roughly equivalent to 2 weeks of water flow over Niagara Falls. So this is a pretty unimaginable volume of water, really just highlighting the scale of the resource demand and underscoring why this isn't just a technical challenge, but also a social and environmental one. We also have to think about the impact on the communities in the areas where these data centers are built. This amount of water could definitely strain the water supply in certain regions, which will also contribute to ethical considerations, which we'll talk about later on. Next slide, please. So we're also seeing some declining investor confidence in Microsoft's position in the AI race. So they've already lost $435 billion in market capitalization since the release of the DeepSeek model. I guess for those who don't know, the release of DeepSeek is basically just an AI model that was on par with OpenAI's best models, but they did it for an insane fraction of the cost. They only spent millions instead of billions on the model, which really has disrupted investor confidence in this area. Also, they're seeing some further pressure from recent tariff announcements. Share prices just across the board, I guess, are declining, which, considering their overcommitments of cash in some areas, they're also losing share value too. So the broader picture is really just investor confidence is slipping. The combination of rising costs, regulatory uncertainty, intensifying competition really have shaken confidence, not just in Microsoft, but in the AI sector as a whole. For a company making such aggressive and high stakes investments, this kind of market reaction really does matter. And we see as a result, Microsoft is already pulling back on some of these commitments. Just in February, I believe they canceled two or more leases for data centers, totaling like 2 gigawatt hours of electricity. So it's definitely becoming an issue for them. Next slide, please. So just to recap some of the financial issues, the key financial question kind of still remains: where's Microsoft going to get the rest of this cash? They've already committed tens of billions to AI infrastructure, and with significant cash still needed to fully execute on these ambitions, they need to consider other funding options and how sustainable their strategy really is. So the one likely path is borrowing. They're well positioned to do it. They could, borrow at low interest rates and raise capital that way. They could also reinvest profits. In particular, their cloud compute platform, Azure, has generated $33 billion in revenue in 2024. So that's a powerful revenue source right there. And that said, Microsoft is also facing a cash flow timing challenge. While they have enough resources overall, the scale and pace of the spending is pretty aggressive, and they must like stagger these investments over several years to manage the cash flow without compromising on strategic goals or financial health. So can they afford to commit to sustainability considerations as well? Possibly in the short term, yes, but with clear trade-offs. They basically have to pick between being at the front of the AI race while having to choose between also building these AI data centers responsibly and sustainably. Next slide, please. So just a brief rundown of our financial issues and our proposed solutions. Our recommendation is sustainable cost management strategy. Microsoft doesn't need to choose between sustainability and cost efficiency. They can strike a balance through smart design and innovation. We've identified 2 key levers to manage the cost while still honoring environmental commitments. So the first would be the hybrid construction with cross-laminated timber selectively. So rather than building the entire data centers from CLT, they can use maybe 15 to 29, well, which are about 15 to 29% more expensive. We suggest they, mix these materials in to like kind of balance this cost. And second is to address the water usage with closed loop water recycling systems, which we'll discuss a little bit. We'll discuss more in detail later on, but it minimizes total consumption, relieving some of the pressure on local water infrastructure and the region it's built in. So these solutions serve Microsoft both as well as the communities they're also operating in. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Vincent, who's going to talk to you guys about some of the legal considerations Microsoft must make.
Thank you, Cole. Next slide, please. Thank you. So when we think about Microsoft and the race with AI, we think about intellectual property and what else comes with that. A lot of other legal rights that they have to make sure that they cross their T's, dot their I's. However, Microsoft wants to be one of the most environmentally friendly, economically friendly companies out there. Well, some legal problems that they're going to run into is the California Climate Corporate Data Analysis Act, which we'll get into later, settling the amount of money that they owe currently, intellectual property rights within this great AI race, and labor and environmental regulations as they continue to build these huge data centers. Now, with advances in AI markets, Microsoft, do they really have enough to settle their debts and explore future opportunities? Well, to do that, they need to make a compliance office, which we'll get to later. Next slide, please. So what is the California Climate Corporate Data Analysis Act? Basically, any company has a headquarters in California. If they generate over $1 billion in revenue, they have to release their environmental impact statements according to California state laws and the EPA. Now, according to their most recent report, Microsoft has released 17.2 million cubic tons of CO2 gas each year. Now, this is a lot of CO2 gas. Not only does this hurt the environment, this hurts our ozone layer, this hurts the surrounding area. And what they found is that 93% of their emissions that they release into the year are scope 3 or indirect emissions. Those are emissions coming from transportation costs of the material or any outside third-party costs that are directly tied into Microsoft financially. Now, according to California Climate Corporate Data Analysis Act and the EPA, anything above 70% is listed as critical. Microsoft is at 97. They are 27% over the critical limit, which is crucial for their company. Not only does this hurt Microsoft as a brand image, it hurts them as they're seen as hypocrites because Microsoft has been promoting for years that they want to become carbon neutral by 2030. It's 2025 and they're not even 30% of their way there. This hurts their brand. This hurts their employees. Like gratitude towards the company, this is generally not a good light for Microsoft. And I know they need to give back to the environment, but they have to start it with being honest about their emissions and learning what they can do better. Next slide, please. Now, in this great AI race, you're going to need to spend a lot of money. But in the past 15 years, Microsoft has owed a sum of 28.9 billion back taxes, or sorry, in their 2023 audit, they owed $28.9 billion in back taxes to the IRS. They already are spending so much money to try and build these new data centers, but they still owe almost $30 billion. That's almost half of what they're spending for the data centers. Now, in the past 15 years, they've had 23 lawsuits and owe about 1.56 billion. And that is a lot, especially for things such as environmental offenses, price fixing, and wage discrimination. That doesn't look good for a company who's trying to do right by the environment or do right by their employees or their customers. What they need to do is they need to settle this debt, and they need to do it in the appropriate fashion. Get in a good light so that way they can be seen throughout the world that they are not only a forward-thinking company, but they're one that does it by the books and make sure that everybody is happy. Next slide, please. So some past and some current lawsuits. Well, in the past, the New York Times and other various newspapers are suing Microsoft for unauthorized use of journalistic articles to train AI. If they're trying to make their AI better, wouldn't it make sense that they legally get journals and other people's writing so it can improve the AI? Well, that has to go through a process. And although it may be tedious, it's necessary. They also face a $1.27 billion antitrust lawsuit. Oh, last slide, please. Thank you. This antitrust lawsuit was for overcharging businesses for the Windows Server. Now, the Windows Server also comes with a multitude and a plethora of different capabilities, that which including their partnership with OpenAI. But if they're being charged for an antitrust lawsuit just for their Windows Server, what else are they charging and what else are they hiding? This is not a good light for Microsoft, and they need to fix this. But Microsoft has been taken on the offensive. They have filed a lawsuit against various individuals for using stolen credentials to exploit their OpenAI services for generating harmful content. Not only is this a bad light for Microsoft, but it's understanding that they need to do better and that they need to make sure that their servers are protected. Next slide, please. So what can they do? Well, what they need to do is they need to get the brand and their trust back in the people. They need to launch an initiative or a Microsoft Green and Fair initiative. What they need to do is they need to commit about 2 billion to carbon reduction. How are they ever going to meet their goals of being carbon neutral in 2030 if they're 5 years away and they're already 30% behind? What they need to do is they also need to openly put out their quarterly reports, and they need to invest into the initiatives. They need to invest more into startups and making them seen as a builder within the community and not just themselves. Additionally, financial risk management. For too long, is Microsoft allocating parts of cash reserves to settle known liabilities that should have been settled in the first place? That number that Cole mentioned in the beginning, 28.9, that is way too much money that they owe in back taxes alone, just for the year of 2023. Who knows if that's going to skyrocket or not? What they need to do is they also need to offset legal liabilities. And how they can do it is with AI revenue growth and projections from Azure. Cole has shown that they have proven to generate $33.7 billion in profit. But what good is that if they're not reinvesting into themselves to make sure that they're doing everything that they can by the book to be seen in a good light? Combined all these together, this is what Microsoft needs to do to fix their issues legally. Now I'm going to pass it to my colleague for the ethical standpoints.
Hello. So, coming up with the ethical issues, when you hear about Microsoft, you think someone who is committed to what they say, and someone who stays with their words and always coming up with new innovations, with time, with deadlines, what they say. But this time, Microsoft hasn't done very well because they said to achieve 100% renewable energy for AI powered data centers and uh, but by the year 2025. But this time they are behind their deadlines and they now have increased their deadline to the year 2030. When I looked into more details about this, I found out that they are somewhat around 10 to 20%. So they planned this in the year 2020, and in the past 5 years, they haven't done very well. They also came up with Project Netic in the year 2015. This was bringing up AI and data centers underwater so as to reduce water consumption for them and making them cool. But we find out that last year they just closed it because it was costing them a lot of money and a lot of energy, which was a bad point for them. Also, I found out that the scope 3 emissions have risen by 30.9% since the 2020 year baseline, which was already up to 96% of the company, as shared by my colleague Vincent. Also, a bit more about scope 3 emissions. It's somewhat like getting indirect use of uh, indirect use of greenhouse gases emission. And now I'll move on with some more ethical issues that I found out with Microsoft. Can you just change the slide? Yeah. So Microsoft has set us some lofty goals and they are far away from achieving them. Also, Microsoft water consumption has increased by 2.1 billion gallons last year. So as this is a very high number, they are making more data centers right now. They have come up with it in Texas and many other places like that so as to reduce taxes, but they are using a lot of water consumption, which is very harmful for the nature as this amount of water can cause drought in any places with small amounts of water. Coming up with a more detailed view about the idea of Nethik, I'll share one more slide with you, and that's the infrastructure cost of underwater and cold land-based data centers. So it was given by ChatGPT, which is also partially owned by Microsoft. So comparing the views of that, we came up with a thing that they should have used data centers in cold lands because it would have costed them less as compared to underwater cooling cost would have already gone low. So the water consumption would already go low, deployment cost would be moderate, and the maintenance cost would be low, and the reliability would be high. This approach is already being uh, used by companies like Meta and Amazon. So as we know that these companies have already used it, we can come up with a solution that we can use this method for the upcoming time. Coming up with the solutions, I would say Microsoft should invest money in regions like Greenland, Norway, or Arctic to open their data centers in those places. This would help them in long run to reduce the water consumption and provide employment to people in those scarce areas. Also, to reduce the scope 3 emissions, which is a big problem, they should partner up with carbon accountable suppliers only, and they should use AI for reducing carbon emissions. So I would like to pass on it to Amok again for giving us a recap about what it was.
Okay, you
Yes.
guys have, just so you know, you've exceeded your 25 minutes, but I will give you 2-minute warning to wrap up your presentation.
Yes, I'll just finish up the recap. So financially, Microsoft has an $80 billion investment, $71 billion in cash, and 29 billions in taxes. Our solution is basically to borrow using their strong credit, reinvest in their profits, and do staggered investments using hybrid constructions and green taxes. Um, Legally, 28.9 billion taxes are owned, and our solution we came up with is to negotiate tax settlement, create compliance office, and fund legal risk buffer using projected AI revenues. Ethically, 30.9% rise in Scope 3 emissions and 2.1 billion gallons of water use has been increased. So our solution we came up with is to release verified emission data and invest $2 billion in carbon reduction, adopt a closed loop water system, which not just helps the local, but also helps the environment, and also use AI optimized sustainable supply chain. Why is this sustainable? This is sustainable because smart financing
Sorry,
keeps growth.
guys, sorry, that was the 2 minutes and everyone has to be held to the same standard. Sorry, it was just a little bit
Mm,
over.
yeah.
But I
Mhm.
think you're just recapping the recap, which is good. Okay. Thank you so much. And in
Thank
a
you.
typical board of directors meeting, I think they would have to continue with their agenda as well. So we're going to move on, and because our board of directors is dying to ask you some questions, so between Emily, Megan, and David, I will let them ask some questions and I'll hop in as well. But first, before we do that, I wanted to just get back to what that ethical portion is. If you could recap that for me, and what what we're doing to actually help the ethics portion. What are you asking us to do as the board
Yeah,
of directors?
sure. So for the
Okay.
ethical issues, I would say that we should invest more money in data centers in cold regions because it will reduce the water consumption. Reducing the
Mhm.
water consumption would help giving water for our other resources that we need for natural living. And opening data centers in cold regions would also provide employment for people in those areas because for the repair and maintenance of our data centers, we need people. And if we teach them once, they'll just understand the concepts and they'll know what they should do. Because the coding concept could be done from anywhere sitting all around the world. So that is not an issue. And for secondly, I would say that to reduce the scope 3 emissions, they should partner up with carbon accountable people because right now the scope 3 emissions are high, which means like transportation, construction cost, construction. So most of the Microsoft's carbon usage is in uh, these kinds of projects, like greenhouse gases are released and stuff. So if they partner up with suppliers who are already carbon accountable, it would be better to reduce the scope 3 emissions for Microsoft as well. Also, using AI for supply chain optimization would be a great idea for reducing carbon emissions.
Okay, so ethically, tell me, so ethically, you mentioned hiring people, cold regions, and the carbon. So what am I ethically changing by doing your solution?
We are providing water, first of all, because in today's world, there are many places where there are droughts and stuff. So people are facing scarcity of water. So we will be
Okay.
able to provide much more water to those areas by using less water over here and using the natural resources that we have.
So the ethical portion is water usage.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Make sure I understand that. I think I got it. All right, Board of Directors, questions for the team, and then after we act as Board of Directors, we will give you feedback for the judge perspective. But how about David, do you have any questions?
Sure, taking a global approach, it seems as though the company has what I would call a reputation risk. And all the other items are kind of underlining the financial, the ethical, all the legal considerations kind of emphasize that we definitely have a reputation risk. We have competitors, we're investing, these monies, but then drilling down, I guess what you're telling us is that some of our investments may not be appropriate based on the financial scope. I understand California, but moving everything or the changing the existing strategy and building new facilities to cold climates, how is that going to, because you mentioned employment, how is that going to affect existing employment issues, legal issues in these other areas?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, does that create any ethical dilemma? But that's a great question, David. We'll give that back to you guys.
I think I'll take this one. If you were to move everything to a colder climate, how it would affect the job market is this. In colder climates, you already have limited jobs that people can perform. Most people are either working, blue collar jobs, or they're working jobs online. What we're offering is more jobs for people who, are more capable in white collar jobs, but also blue collar jobs with maintenance. We're giving back to the community because not only are we going to build up smaller communities, we're also going to allow people to live a livelihood that they want to and not feel boxed in with ever the environment that they're in. Ethically, this puts us at a good standpoint because not only are we creating more jobs, but we're giving back to the environment. And what's more important is that Microsoft is seen in this light. I know Akhil mentioned that they can partner with carbon neutral companies. Most carbon neutral companies and startups nowadays come from those colder climates. For example, they're getting their steel and their materials from Sweden and all the other companies within there. So really what they're doing is they can use that to promote themselves and make them seen in a better light, showing that they don't have to spend all this money in California that most other companies do. And they don't have to keep spending all this money and send it into some weird unknown region, to try and build up a third world country. What they can do is they can already invest in the land that they have, and they can invest with the people that they have.
So Alaska then is not a practical alternative to Greenland and some of the other countries that you mentioned?
Not really, because it's shut off from the Atlantic. That would cost more with them trying to import their goods than it would with them getting the people there. Also, Alaska is really populated around areas such as Juneau and Anchorage. So those are all big pilot hubs for people, but those are usually cargo. It's a very different, and that would only just increase their cost. If you use someplace like Greenland or Iceland even, not only is that more central to where they're going to gain their materials, but it's more accessible.
Thank you.
How about Emily or Megan? Did you have a question?
Yeah, sure. I can ask. Thank you, everyone. Gave a lot of data, jam-packed, lots of numbers to think through. I'll bring up a question I had that may be a result of how this was presented. So I think on one of the slides, NATIC initiative was called out as a disaster. I think those were the word that was used. And I think on a preceding slide, there was a recommendation from the group about engaging in additional green initiatives. How do you reconcile those 2 points? In other words, if Natick was a disaster, how do you mitigate against another green initiative if that's part of the solution being effective or avoiding the same path that the Natick initiative did?
So I'll come up with this, and it's because Meta and Amazon have already use this solution and they are working on it. They have already set up their data centers over there in colder regions. So we have a already tested solution that was tested by other companies, and it would be a better and safer opportunity for us to get what we need. So I believe that that should satisfy you with what your question was.
So just to clarify, the response is then that this is proven ground, that someone has already trod this path, and therefore is the proof of concept is already there under that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Emily, did you have a question that we haven't asked yet? Okay, thank
I
you.
do, yeah. Thank you so much for your presentation. I had some follow-up questions about your proposal to use CLT. 2 questions. One is, what are the main factors for the cost premium that you're seeing associated with CLT? And then you mentioned using kind of a mixed CLT option. And so I'm curious if that is on a per building basis or across the portfolio, or if you could elaborate more about how you propose to do so.
Yeah, sure. So CLT is more expensive, mainly because of just the precision engineering and like high quality adhesives they're using in it. It's also a lot less like mainstream than your steel and concrete. So just compared to those, it's going to be more expensive. And then with our mixed approach, we're essentially just saying to build like not necessarily on a building by building basis, but just mix materials in the construction itself.
Got it. One more follow-up. I guess with the global approach to that, how do you anticipate any setbacks or challenges of, you know, sourcing that resource on a global scale?
Right. Yeah. Obviously with the size of these data centers, Microsoft sourcing these materials may impact the supply chain for that material specifically. So we would probably suggest that they find a contractor or a startup out there and partner with them to ensure there's not like limited availability of this resource.
Good. Thank you, Emily. I mean, Cole, I have a question for you too, so we'll just keep you on the hot seat. I appreciate it. And maybe you did talk about it, but I think it was a little bit earlier in the presentation, so I might have missed it. But what is our return on investment for the cost to move it, or our return on equity? Sorry. So when the cost to move our centers where we already have working, when would we see a return? Did that
Right.
get
So yeah. So for the time being, a lot of these projects are like really in the early phases. So
Okay.
they're just kind of securing some of the leases for these properties and just starting development. So we're saying essentially they should reconsider from the start. I don't think they should necessarily abandon any of their current projects that are currently
Okay.
going. Yeah, so essentially just for new constructions, we should focus on building them in cooler climates.
Okay, so then that kind of answers my earlier question about ethically, if we were to shut down what we currently have, what kind of impact that would be. Okay. Excellent. How about any other questions as board of directors for Emily, Megan, or David? Pretty good. Excellent. The CAAVV team, any questions for us as board of directors? Okay. All right. So then we're going to shift gears and put our judges' hats on and give you feedback on your presentation to help you for future presentations. And then you could ask us questions as well. So I'll start with David.
The first thing we look at is your narrative or your executive summary, which I thought was very, very good. And I say that because based on your academic level of freshmen and sophomores, I thought your presentation and your executive summary were very well done. I also liked how you focused on the key elements, which we will judge: ethical, financial, and legal. Pretty well laid that out. Overall, I'm impressed. Going forward, remember the questions that we asked. Learn from that. Too bad about exceeding the time. Actually, I was rather interested in what you were saying, so the time element for me personally was not important. However, you know, as a judge and in this format, it's very important that you adhere to the time element, especially moving forward in your next presentations. But overall, I thought it was a good job.
Agree. Thank you. How about Emily?
Sure. Overall, great job. I thought the slides were helpful in following along. I know you shared a lot of key metrics and data points, so it's helpful to have a visual of that. And I think in particular, I really liked the water kind of equivalent with the waterfall and all of that. I thought that was really compelling, just in demonstrating the immense impact of water that these data centers might have. Let's see, trying to think what else. Overall, I think it was great how you kind of divvied up the key points with your team members. I thought that was great. And you all kind of touched on similar things across the board though as well. So it was cohesive. One super minor tip, I love the backgrounds that you all have. I think that's really clean. I did notice that some of your backgrounds are backwards to us. So it's, again, very minor comment, but I think that's great to just show the consistent team. And we do this in the professional realm as well with our interviews. And also just the logo at the bottom is hard to see just because the name is covering it on Zoom. So again, very, very minor, but I think that it's great to have a consistent background as a team. So I really like that.
That was good. Thank you, Emily. Megan?
I love that Akil moved to the side as you said that, Emily, so the logo showed. But
I know, he did.
I will say it's very impressive. The scope of what you gentlemen tackled is nothing short of of massive. I mean, there's so much data that you provided, and I felt you did a very good job in making a compelling case. I mean, I learned a lot in this session, and I certainly felt the pain point. And I think you did a really excellent job of making the audience at a board level aware of, hey, there's a problem. I will say now the caveat to that is I think you might have done such a good job that you fell into a pitfall. I think over 2/3 of your time was spent on creating that pain point. I would encourage you consolidate that, flip it, because I think we missed out on, like David, I was anxious to hear more. I think we missed out on hearing about the solution and the compelling return that we could get from that. So my feedback to you would be if you can kind of flip that, and instead of spending 2/3 of time on creating pain and 1/3 on solution, do the inverse. Give us 1/3 time in pain point, and then 2/3 time to really kind of start to see the vision of the future. I think you'll be doing yourself a great favor, because I know there was really good data that we probably didn't get to from that side. I also say I've sat in probably over 250 board meetings, both as an attendee and as a presenter. But your slides were very good. There were a few that looked a little out of sync with the brand, but overall they were concise, and I felt that by and large the group as a whole knew the information. If you were reading the slides, I could not tell. I think you took some time to make some impactful pauses, and you were really talking through the information in a way that, to me, indicated that you know your stuff. It's not just reading from a slide deck, which is hard to do. So so great job there. And let's see if there was anything else. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, if you can flip it a little bit, crunch that pain point, set up context piece down to the smaller part of the session, and then spend the majority of the time sharing the solution, why you're excited about it, why you think that's a path, you'll be next level. So really good job.
Yes, thank you for that feedback. And I'm going to just tie right in. So along with what Megan was saying, I feel like, yes, the amount of time you spent on that, but I also feel like the finances could have been moved to the end, because I think in Cole's description, you were having to tell a little bit more about the company to get us to understand the finances. And if you had done it the reverse, and then you could have just flowed right into that and spent less time on that. But I did really like, Cole, your recap. So I wrote down good recap of your financials at the end. And I actually think if you almost like that was said it all, right? All of you kind of fell into the pitfall of talking to us like Microsoft was somebody else. So you should be talking to us like we are the Microsoft board of directors, and say, you guys, you should do this. You guys are, spending too much or may not. So just kind of fitting into that role. And Vincent, who has left us, will you guys let Vincent know that I loved Vincent's recap of Cole's numbers and how he pulled those financial numbers in and just re-solidified the points that Cole made. So I thought that was really good. And Akil, good job on hitting to that ethic point, but maybe just because this is an ethics competition, recap and restate that ethical being, so we know, yes, ethically, we've got this, right? Because I had to really fish for it a little bit, but I know it was there. Okay. And overall, excellent job. And so just work on maybe just the order and the timing, because you had great data.
I'd like to make one final comment, if I may.
Sure,
That
of
is
course.
that sometimes these presentations, someone will talk about legal, the next person talks about financials, ethicals, but your presentation, you had what I thought were very good segues where you were
Yeah.
able to make connections of
Yes.
all three and how they would impact either positively or negative. So I thought your presentation was good. I liked it. Thank you.